The story of Esther is one of the most well-known in the Bible. She was a young Jewish orphan living in Persia and surprisingly became the wife of the most powerful emperor of the time. This narrative captivates many people, and Esther played a crucial role in God's plan to save her people. In Esther's time, the Jews faced a serious threat of extermination. But how did a young Jewish woman of humble origin manage to become the Queen of Persia and the heroine of one of the most beloved stories in the Bible? And why is there no mention of her in other historical sources about the Persian period besides the Bible? In this video, you will discover the true story of Esther and the lessons we can learn from her. To understand the story of Esther, we first need to know the historical context. When Jerusalem was conquered by King Nebuchadnezzar II, many residents of the Kingdom of Judah were taken to other parts of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. An ancestor of Esther was one of these prisoners, taken to Babylon, along with King Jehoiakim of Judah. Later, Babylon was conquered by the Medo-Persian Empire, which formed the great Achaemenid Empire. Among the most well-known Persian leaders were Cyrus the Great, his grandson Darius I, and his great-grandson Xerxes I, known in the Bible as Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus ruled the Persians between 486 and 465 before Christ, and it was during this period that the young Esther lived. Ahasuerus is described by historians as a powerful and ruthless king. At that time, the Persian Empire stretched from India to Ethiopia and, according to the Bible, had about 127 provinces. Scholars estimate that the empire had about 100 million inhabitants, of which at least 3 million were Jews. Esther's story took place in Susa, one of the 3 capitals of the Persian Empire, which served as an administrative and residential center. Susa was also the winter residence of the king, where Ahasuerus had a luxurious palace. The story begins with King Ahasuerus gathering his nobles, officials, military leaders, and princes of the provinces of Persia. For 180 days, he showcased the great wealth and glory of his kingdom. Afterwards, he organized a 7-day banquet for all the residents of Susa. These banquets served to display the power and wealth of the empire. Many scholars believe that this event was linked to a meeting convened by Ahasuerus in his 3rd year of reign to discuss military campaigns in Greece. The Bible reports that while King Ahasuerus was offering a banquet for his princes and officials, his wife, Queen Vashti, also held a banquet for the women in the palace. At one point, the king asked Vashti to come to him wearing the royal crown to show her beauty to the guests. However, Queen Vashti refused the request, probably because the order was dishonorable. Because of this refusal, King Ahasuerus deposed her from her position. After Ahasuerus' anger subsided, and he perhaps began to miss Vashti, his advisors suggested that he summon the young virgins and beautiful women of the kingdom to choose a new queen. One of these young women was Hadassah, a Jewish orphan whose Hebrew name means myrtle, a type of shrub. Hadassah was the daughter of Abihail and was raised by her cousin Mordecai, who was from the tribe of Benjamin. Mordecai was the son of Jair, the grandson of Shimei, and the great-grandson of Kish. Hadassah was also known as Esther, probably her Persian name. She lived between 2 worlds, her Jewish upbringing and the pagan society of Susa, where she lived. The name Esther can mean star in Persian, but some scholars believe it may be related to the name of the Babylonian goddess Ishtar. In the Bible, Esther is described as a very beautiful and attractive woman, one of the most beautiful young women in the kingdom. Therefore, she was chosen to present herself to the king. Esther underwent a beauty treatment that lasted 12 months. After this period, one of the eunuchs brought her before King Ahasuerus. The young women were presented to the king and only saw him again if he liked them and called them by name. That is what happened with Esther. The Bible says that the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she gained his favor and benevolence more than any other virgin. Esther pleased the king and managed to stand out in the Persian court thanks to divine providence. She was crowned queen in place of Vashti, and King Ahasuerus held a great banquet for all his nobles and officials. Vashti was deposed in the 3rd year of Ahasuerus's reign, while Esther was brought to the king in the 7th year. This means that about 4 years passed between Vashti's deposition and Esther's selection as queen. During this time, divine providence prepared Esther for her important role in the history of the Jews. As queen, Esther helped dismantle a conspiracy against the king, discovered by her cousin Mordecai. Suddenly, the biblical story focuses on Haman, an important minister of the Persian Empire and a descendant of the Amalekites, ancient enemies of the Israelites. Haman was promoted by King Ahasuerus to a position of great power and authority above all other princes of Persia. The king ordered all his servants at the palace gate to bow down and pay homage to Haman, including Mordecai, cousin of Queen Esther. However, Mordecai refused to bow or pay homage to Haman, which was seen as a great disrespect and deeply wounded Haman's pride. Haman's anger against Mordecai turned into hatred against all Jews. He thought that punishing only Mordecai was not enough. Therefore, he planned to destroy all the Jews in the Persian Empire. Haman convinced King Ahasuerus to issue a decree to kill all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one single day, offering a large amount of money to the royal treasury as an incentive. The king, trusting Haman, gave him the royal ring to seal the decree, which was sent to all the provinces. Mordecai told Esther about Haman's terrible plan and asked her to speak with the king to help. However, Esther could not present herself to the king without being summoned, as it could cost her life. Mordecai reminded Esther that perhaps God had placed her in that position precisely to save the Jews. Until that point, the king did not know that Esther was Jewish, and therefore did not realize that by following Haman's advice, he had decreed the death of the people of his own queen. Faced with the delicate situation, Queen Esther asked all the Jews to fast for 3 days. She decided to risk her life and present herself to the king. After the 3 days, Esther dressed in her royal clothes and went to the inner courtyard of the palace. King Ahasuerus, seated on his throne, saw Esther and extended his golden scepter, allowing her to approach. He asked what she desired and said he would give her up to half of the kingdom. Esther, acting wisely, invited Ahasuerus and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. During the banquet, Esther asked the king to hold a second banquet the next day, also for him and Haman. Haman went home and boasted to his friends and family about the prestige he had achieved in the empire. However, his hatred for Mordecai and the Jews remained strong. His family suggested that he build a large gallows for Mordecai. That night, something providential happened. The king could not sleep and asked that the kingdom's records be read to him. During the reading, he discovered that Mordecai had saved his life by exposing a conspiracy. This happened just when Haman was planning to ask permission to hang Mordecai, the Queen Esther's cousin. The king asked if Mordecai had been rewarded for this heroic act, and upon finding out that he had not, asked Haman, without mentioning Mordecai's name, to honor the man the king wanted to acknowledge. Haman, thinking the king was referring to him, suggested an elaborate celebration. To his great humiliation, he was forced to honor Mordecai publicly. After that, Haman returned home very upset, but soon was summoned by the king's officers to the second banquet offered by Queen Esther. During this banquet, Esther revealed to the king that she was Jewish and that all her people were condemned to death because of a plot by Haman. The king became furious and went out to the palace garden. Haman, realizing that his situation was critical, stayed at the banquet to beg for his life from Queen Esther. When the king returned to the banquet, he found Haman fallen on Esther's couch. This was a serious breach of protocol, and the king thought Haman was attempting to attack the queen. The king's servants realized this meant the end for Haman and covered his face. Although covering the face of a condemned person was a common practice among the Greeks and Romans, this is the only reference to this custom among the Persians. In any case, Haman was hanged on the same gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Since the king could not cancel the previous decree, Queen Esther managed to have a new decree published, giving the Jews the right to defend themselves and to destroy, kill, and annihilate anyone who threatened them. Because of this, the Jews were able to protect themselves and killed their enemies, in addition to destroying Haman's house. Queen Esther also obtained permission from King Ahasuerus to extend the defense for one more day in Susa, perhaps due to the great hatred against the Jews in the city. In total, more than 75,000 enemies of the Jews were killed. Although the second decree allowed the Jews to plunder the goods of their enemies, they took nothing. This contrasts with the story of Saul, who took the spoils of the Amalekites and ended up losing his throne as the first king of Israel. It was in this context that the festival of Purim began to be celebrated by the Jews, commemorating the deliverance they had. The Jewish people survived an irrevocable death decree. Over time, many critics have questioned the veracity of the story of Queen Esther, mainly because she does not appear in other historical sources besides the Hebrew Bible. Some theologians have even had difficulty accepting the Book of Esther as part of the biblical canon. However, details about life in the Persian court in Susa and the campaigns of Xerxes against the Greeks align well with the scenario described in the Book of Esther. Therefore, the more conservative view is that the story of Esther is a historical record, not fiction. The absence of Esther in other sources can be explained by the fact that she was not the mother of Xerxes' heir apparent. This is a complex issue, with arguments for and against the historicity of Esther. The essential thing is to understand that the story of Esther leads us to reflect on the sovereignty of God in carrying out his purposes, even if we do not directly observe his action. The Book of Esther is unique because it does not explicitly mention God, nor does it report great miracles, yet the divine hand is clearly present, guiding events, even those that seem ordinary or coincidental. Often, when we look at our own lives, we may not notice anything extraordinary. The fact that we do not notice God's action can be challenging, but the reality is that his providence continues to be active, even if we do not perceive it or have doubts. Moreover, the story of Esther teaches us to trust in God, even in risky situations. It also shows the importance of acting with wisdom and asking God to guide our decisions. If you liked this video, consider sharing it with someone who may not be familiar with the story of Esther in the Bible. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more videos.